Hello leaders, my name is Jason Graziani. Welcome to our channel, Leader for Life. Today we're going to carry over into our series of American politics. We first covered in our 5-part series, American Individual. In part 2, we talked about American Worker. Today we're going to be talking about American Security and really dive into what I believe are the 5 most important subjects as it pertains to American security. Now, before we jump into American security and national security, I want to give you 3 disclosures, as are the same with all 5 videos. Disclosure number 1. This is not a partisan video, meaning I'm not speaking to you as a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. I'm not trying to give you my opinion or sway you towards thinking one specific way. But what I am trying to do is number 2, identify and simplify the issues before you and ask the questions on this video so that you could decide what you believe in. Because ultimately, number 3, as a leader, and if you choose to be a leader for life, which is what we hope that you do, you're going to have to answer these questions and stand for something, because these are issues that are before us in the United States of America today. Let's dive into American security, issue number 1, which is specifically national security and national defense. Here's a question to ask yourself. How much of our annual budget in the United States should we allocate towards military spending? Second question, of the 200 or so countries that are in the world currently today, how many of them should the United States have a presence in? And how much should we have military bases and spend money in other places around the world? Again, before you start yelling and screaming or deciding on the video, I'm not telling you the answer. I'm asking you to make a decision and then work yourself backwards to say, how did you come to that decision? Do you believe it's in our best interest to have the largest military in the world? And if you believe that it is it worth the money to you to keep the arms race going up with other countries if they were to pass us as a military superpower? Again, that's for you to decide. That's point number 1, which is the military defense. Point number 2, foreign threats, specifically other countries, foreign hostile powers. How is it best to deal with a foreign hostile power? Now, I know that we all like to think that everybody's a good person and everybody's going to do the right things, but in the event that a country acts in a hostile nature towards the United States, what's the best way to solve the problem? You could say negotiation. Fair. You could say economic sanctions. Maybe we could do things to hurt a country economically. Maybe you're going to go as far as to say drones if physical force needs to be used. But when is boots on the ground appropriate? When and where is it appropriate to put the lives of American soldiers at risk for the security of our country? Again, what's your decision, and how would you process that question should one of the people that you work with or that you're leading ask you what you think about that subject? That's point number 2, which is foreign threats. Point number 3, domestic terrorism / border security. More not hostile threats that are coming from afar, but maybe things that are happening here on our homeland, on our own soil. Very important question to ask is this. Do you believe that borders are essential for a country to be a sovereign power? If the answer is yes, the follow-up question is this. How would you protect those borders? Along the same lines, do you believe in birthright citizenship? Meaning, if somebody's born in the United States, do you believe that they are automatically granted citizenship? Again, your opinion. And then finally, in a spirit of having a country that has the freedom to do many things, including protesting, where do you see violence fitting in to protesting? Is it appropriate? If so, how far? And if not, how do you stop that? Subject number 4 as it pertains to American security is this: cybersecurity. Now we're getting away from traditional warfare and we're entering into what many believe in the future would be called cyber warfare. Space Force was created recently by the United States, specifically under President Donald Trump, to do what? To protect the satellites that are in orbit around the Earth because of how important our communication, cell phones, and all the other correspondence that we have with one another is. And so that's great. But are we better off with fewer powerful companies in the technology sector to compete globally and to be able to help watch us from the private sector? Or are we better off having a lot of smaller companies do that security work, but maybe they have less economies of scale because they're smaller organizations? That's for you to question and for you to ask. The final point on American security is this: police reform and prison reform. First, you could ask yourself this question: is there a need for prison reform and or police reform? A question to ask is this: what is the appropriate incarceration rate a country should have? Now, obviously, that's open for discussion, but if you look at the statistics in the United States, per capita, we spend the most money and put the most amount of people in prison. Again, I'm not giving you my opinion about it, but what do you think the appropriate incarceration rate is? And a follow-up question to that is this: do you believe that the justice system is fair? If not, what specifically would you do to correct the component that you don't believe is fair? If you don't believe the justice system is fair, what specific component do you believe is not fair? And what would you do to solve the solution? And here's another question for you. Do you believe that our law enforcement, our police officers, do you believe that overall our police officers are fundamentally good? And if you say yes, then okay. But if you do say no, here's a question for you. How do you solve the issue? How do you solve the issue of finding out who's a good police officer and who's not? And what specifically do you think would help the law enforcement if you do believe that there's some issues there? Is this a budgetary constraint? Maybe this is just a training function. You decide, but I'd love to hear from you. Now, regardless how you feel about these issues, it's very important to understand two things. Number one, in order to be a leader for life, you have to have a certain sense of compassion. You have to have a certain sense of understanding, knowing that you may be very passionate about a couple of these issues or many of these issues, but then somebody else within your leadership realm, they also may have a differing opinion. And it's very important that they feel that they could come to you and that they could speak to you and that they will not be judged for having a differing opinion than you have. But number two is also important, because in order for you to be a leader for life, you have to have convictions that you stand for. You can't fold to make everybody else happy, but you do have to have a level of compassion. It's a very tough balancing act that you have to have right there in the middle, where I'm compassionate towards your viewpoint, but also I stand for something too. And I can't lose myself by not telling you that where I stand in something, but at the same time, I respect where you're coming from. Again, it's so much easier to say on this video than to actually do in real life, because in real life, this is a very difficult thing to do. But this is something all of us as Americans are working on together. So whether you run a school, whether you run a church, maybe you run your household, or you're running a corporation, a nonprofit, anywhere where there's other human beings around that you're leading, you're in a position of leader and you've chosen to be a leader for life. It's so important to know this. The free-flowing exchange of ideas is critical in a successful democracy. Let me say that again. The free-flowing exchange of ideas on both sides without judgment. You may have passion, but no judgment. Free-flowing exchange of ideas is critical to the success of any democracy. Without it, we become a dictatorship. Without it, we become totalitarians. Without it, even worse, people stop thinking for themselves. And we cannot have that. And I'll leave you with a quote from Abraham Lincoln. And he said, "Any man can overcome adversity. If you really want to test the character of a man, give him power." And you'll find out exactly who that person is. So as we wrap up our third video on American politics, talking about American security, if any of this content helped you and these questions really got you to think, maybe you've got some answers for a few of them. Maybe there's some things that you need to work on. I highly encourage you to start answering these questions. And if there's a question I'm not asking, or there's another angle that I didn't approach it, I'd love for you to comment. I'd love for you to reach out. And the key is subscribe to our channel, Leader for Life. Share the content with somebody that you think needs to get a little bit more involved in the political process. Again, not having some partisan jam their opinion down their throat, but really just asking the right questions so that they could start thinking for themselves. That's the beautiful thing of this channel. That's the beautiful thing of these videos that we're making, is that you, whether you're in your car, whether you're at work, whether you're at home, you could actually listen and think. You could go back and you don't have to be put on the spot by other people. It's just you and I talking. It's just you and it's just me. I'm asking some questions, you're answering them. But you're not answering them for me because you need to. I'm not your boss. I'm not, maybe you see me as a coach figure, but really, I just want to kind of peel peel back the onion, ask you some questions so that you get a little bit more rooted in your opinion, in your belief system, and I think that I'll help you to be a better leader for life. With that being said, you guys take care, God bless, and I can't wait to see you at our next video, video number 4 on American politics. Take care, bye-bye.